Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. On today's episode, we talk about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. We've ignored it for a few episodes, but we can't ignore it any longer. We talk about Trump's visit with NATO and what happened at the NATO meetings. And then we spend at least 40 minutes at the end of the podcast talking about the World Cup. Unlike our basketball commentary, we really do connect it to geopolitics, and it's also just incredible. So I would suggest you at least try it, even if you're not a soccer/football fan. But just so you know, the last 40 minutes or so of this conversation is going to get pretty heavy on the soccer. You can email us anytime you want if you want to talk about what the cousins are up to. Otherwise, take care of the people that you love. Cheers. See you out there. Listeners, I'm forcing Marko to talk about the world first before we talk about World Cup, because if we start with the World Cup, we're going to talk about the World Cup for the entire 80 minutes that we're here. And there is some stuff going on in the world, cousin. We've got
no, there isn't. There's just
yes,
the World Cup. There's just the World Cup. There's nothing else going on. I don't even know. Like, come on, Egypt just got robbed, Jacob. All right, go ahead.
Well, no, it's good. I love that you're rooting for the underdog there, but we've got a tanker blown up in the Strait of Hormuz. This is like the third ship now in the last couple of days. We had one cargo ship that was hit off of Yemen. We've got the NATO meeting in Turkey and everything that came out of that. President Trump, I think President Trump is he's rehearsing the old hits. He's going after Greenland again. It's like, we've heard this one, Mr.
Yes.
President. I think you need to do something else, but we'll get to that in the World Cup too. There's some interesting stuff about Marine Le Pen and French elections. There's a Chinese submarine nuclear missile test. So I wanted to hit those four things and then dive into World Cup. Why don't we start with, by popular demand, somebody outed us on X and realized you guys haven't talked about Iran for the last three episodes, and we haven't, which has been delightful. But I think we have to talk about it, cousin, because we've got this new tanker. Qatar is accusing Iran of striking it. A Saudi ship was damaged. There was another tanker that was damaged off the coast of Oman yesterday. And then you've had, stuff going on in Yemen, the Houthis, and that cargo ship being hit over the weekend. I had an Iranian security analyst on my podcast last week, and I asked him sort of his take on everything that was going on. And he was not particularly sanguine. He said that the deal is so amorphous that both sides can, claim that it's over, but also can claim that neither side is actually doing any of the things that were promised. And we should also just say, like, it's July. The Strait of Hormuz is it open? Is it not open? And Brent crude can't rise above 70 or 75 a barrel. So I don't know. What do you want to say about Iran to start with?
I mean, I think that the markets, both oil markets, energy markets, and the stock market is in a put up or shut up mode. Like, this has been going on since February 28th, right? Or was I don't even remember anymore. Yeah. This has been going on for all of March, all of April, all of May, all of June, 4 months. And during that time, the two sides have circled each other. They haven't reloaded. At least the Americans have not. We haven't seen broad-based troop movements or vessel movements. Of course, the United States of America retains the capability to bomb Iran whenever it wants. Fine. But, why take any of this more seriously than before? And, our good friend and fellow cousin Matt Gherkin, he had this chart of like oil prices and how they would impact the behavior of Iran. And I took that chart and kind of extrapolated it, saying that it would actually impact the behavior of both sides. The range was 90 to 120. That was the range during the conflict itself. At $90, everybody got a little bit, hold me back. Everybody got a little bit more aggressive. At $120 Brent, everybody kind of calmed down. Now, that's unsustainable at these levels because global inventories have been drawn down. We cannot have no shipping through Hormuz. So the two sides have decided to pretend like there's a deal to let some shipping through, which there are ships going through now, more so than there was in the 4 months before. But now that range is probably 70 to 90, I would guess. And so when oil prices, particularly Brent, is at 70, that's like 90 of April and May. At 70, people get a little bit, intense. They wanna show off, throw some missiles at LNG tankers, and at 90, they're going to be like, oh, okay, cool, 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 everything is fine. So I think the new range is 70 to 90, and that's what's happening. We're now at $70 Brent. We were actually at 68, shockingly. I can't even believe we went under 70, and I have been sanguine this entire time, except in January when I told everybody that this would happen. Um, just a little caveat there. But yeah, so like, I think that that's what's really happening at this point. Oil prices are really low. And so that gives both sides a little bit of room to maneuver. And so I think that the big cognitive disconnect that people think is that they think that the reality is influencing oil prices. What I don't think people understand is that it's oil prices that are influencing reality. And so Iran, Israel, and the United States are like crickets that synchronize their cricketing based on the environmental context that they find themselves in which case, when oil prices go down, they feel a little bit better about showing off how tough they are. When oil prices start going higher, they say, okay, fine, like let's let more ships through. And so that's where we are. I don't think anything fundamental has changed. Oh, and we're also
Do
waiting
you
for Iran to bury its supreme leader, which if we get from now until July 9th, when it happens, unscathed, I think that'll be a big victory for everyone, except
well,
for the
and one of the
leader.
and one of the big things is that the new supreme leader is still, we haven't seen him. They're burying his wife, they're burying his kids, now they're burying his father. Like, he still has not appeared. He has not really, like, he's not out there. So is he even alive? Is the IRGC running things? Like, I think that's also part of it. But I think part of this is also, I mean, President Trump. I'll quote him yesterday in the Oval Office. We're recording Tuesday, July 7th. This probably comes out tomorrow. So yesterday, Monday, he says we're either going to make a deal or we're going to finish the job. We can knock down their bridges in 1 hour. We can knock out their energy supply. So he's going, back to this well of I can destroy them. And, the MOU deal that was reached last month, it's supposed to offer a 60-day period for negotiations. And I mean, both the media and I think the normal person reacting to this is grateful for 60-day period because you can finally start to say, aha, like this is the time period that they'll negotiate. And then by the time we get to the end of the 60 days, maybe things will kind of be more realistic. But the threat that the Iranian security analyst put to me that I couldn't well refute was that Iran itself is looking at the 60-day pause and saying this may very well just be the United States gearing up for round two here, like have 60 days of lower oil prices and the World Cup and everything else, and then you get to day 60, the United States is ready to sort of go at it again, and Iran has to be prepared for that. And I can't refute that. Like, I guess that is possible. I'm like you. I think Iran is done with this conflict, and I think the United States is done with this conflict, and I think this is all posturing, but it's not a zero. I also think we should talk about, we had Rory Johnston on the podcast as an honorary cousin. Um, as we've talked about before, the Mad Max scenario has not emerged. But if you go look at oil price charts from the 1970s, yes, there was a significant increase after the 73 oil embargo. But the real jump up, if you sort of zoom back at a macro level, was 79. You jump up a rung from 73 to 74, and then prices kind of stay elevated. And then 79 is where the roof really blows off of prices. And I just, when you put together, as you said, replenishing inventories, China coming back onto the market in a meaningful way, I think we're dunking on the oil alarmists a little bit too early. They were obviously wrong about the short term impact, and I would throw myself in there with them. But I'm zagging a little bit here. I think they're now being dunked on a little bit too much. Like, they do have a point. At some point, the math is going to catch up with the world. And if Iran blows up a tanker and President Trump blows up all the bridges, like, I don't know. Am I reaching here, or do you really think it's just over?
So first of all, I think that everybody should stop reading the nonsense that's in these deals. Like,
Mm.
nobody should ever quote the memorandum of understanding. Nothing written in it is in any way, shape, or form, holy. This is not the U.S. Constitution. We just celebrated 250 years. Oh, and by the way, even that extraordinary document has amendments, so even that wasn't holy. Like, you're talking about something these, two sides slapped on the back of a cocktail napkin in a bar in Geneva. Like, I put zero stocks on everything that's in there. You should take the memorandum of understanding to understand that it reveals true preferences. Again, we've had plenty of time for both sides to blow each other up to smithereens. In the case of the United States of America, it could have blown up the energy facilities. It could have blown up the bridges. In the case of Iran, can't hurt America, but certainly could have blown up more of the Qatari LNG, could have sunk more boats that were just sitting idly in the Persian Gulf. So the point is that we have the revealed preferences of both actors, which is not to fight. Like, sorry, but it's just a fact. Why? Because none of these issues really matter. And because what really matters is the constraints on both sides, which we've talked about on this show over and over again. In the US, it's domestic politics. What changes in 60 days for President Trump in terms of the economic calculus? Nothing. Things just get worse. What changes to Iran in terms of, if they cause a global calamity, losing all friends and allies across the world? Like nothing. They're still in the same boat. And finally, I think that, again, the oil alarmists were not like completely wrong. I mean, they are counting oil barrels on planet Earth. And the fact of the matter is that we do have less cushion than before. And so all I see is a self regulating mechanism, an equilibrium, where those inventory levels are starting to motivate the two sides to let some oil through. That's where we are. There's another issue, which is that by 2027, there'll be a new pipeline taking UAE crude to Fujairah. All of Saudi pipelines go through the other way. The rest of the world is going to adjust. And so, there's also a scenario where Iran simply loses the leverage at some point in 2027. Now, the bears amongst us, the alarmists, the folks who always think the world is going to end, they're going to say, they must strike now. Okay, to what end? To what end? Just hasten your demise. Bring forward the punitive strikes that the US could do. Why would you do that? You are going to lose leverage over Hormuz. You are absolutely going to do that. But that doesn't actually accelerate you into being more of an asshole. That actually makes you start thinking, how do we monetize the leverage we have right now? We need the deal. We need the sanction relief. And we need the ships to start going through Hormuz so we can toll them, so we can charge them. That's what we need. Not if leverage is going to go in 2027, might as well strap ourselves with a suicide belt and blow up. And I mean, okay, fine. That could be a way to do it. The final point I would just say is that the longer this mushy reality goes on, the more it becomes the reality. And I say mushy because it's neither $200 oil nor do we have a deal. So for President Trump, he did make the statement you just cited yesterday. But 2-3 months ago, all he was talking about was Iran. Now he is talking about how he, influenced FIFA into removing a red card. Now he's talking about Greenland. Now he is visiting Europeans and being disappointed about their lack of spending, apparently. Now there's so many other things on the menu. And I just don't see there really being a cacophony of, Americans aggrieved by what's happened. Nobody cares. When was the last time someone talked about highly enriched uranium stockpile? No one brought it up. When was the last time somebody even talked about tolls? Trump is shaking his little fist in tolls. Meanwhile, Europeans are yeah, we're going to have to pay some tolls. It's fine, whatever. Fine, I mean, it's Trump who gave Iran a $350 billion reinvestment clause in the memorandum. Why not just finance it with Malaysians and Indonesians and Bangladeshis paying for tolls? What's the difference? In my view, you're making Iran great again. Might as well make them earn it. Put some environmental tolling on the ships. Clean some barnacles off of the bottom. I don't know. And the final point I would say for Iran itself, they themselves domestically have had to kind of swallow what just happened. People talk about hardliners and softliners in Iran. It's whatever. It's parties of the same regime. It's fine. But they themselves then have had to now digest this for the last several weeks. And the longer it goes on, the more this unsettled equilibrium will have been digested. And so that's what I would say. I think the oil prices are motivating the kinetic activity. Once you start getting up higher in oil prices, kinetic activity settles, as has been the case for 4 months. And finally, both sides are revealing their preferences with their very tepid, flaccid commitment to war. And yes, I am being phallic on purpose.
I agree with most of what you're saying. I think the one thing that I would push back on, and this is the part of the mushiness that is not sustainable, is who is paying the toll? What is the toll? How much is it? Is it voluntary, like the Strait of Malacca? Is it not? And I think it also sets a dangerous precedent, or maybe doesn't set a precedent, because if a toll does, or an environmental fee, or whatever they're going to call it, tax, call it whatever you want, if Iran is either de facto or de jure granted that, it's not going to stay with the Strait of Hormuz. Like the Strait of Hormuz is a particular strait, but there are other choke points in the world. There are maritime choke points, there are air freight choke points, there are land choke points. International law recognizes that if you go through a canal, if infrastructure was built by someone, okay, then you're supposed to pay. But if you're paying Iran, like that's a big deal. And it's not as easy as just you wave your hands and the European ships go through and pay the toll, because Iran is technically sanctioned by the US government, by a bunch of other governments. So if you're a ship owner or a shipping company and you send a ship through the Strait of Hormuz, and in order to guarantee your ship's survival so that it doesn't suffer the same fate that this Qatari tanker faced, you have to pay Iran. Now you're doing the legal cost benefit analysis of, okay, and 3 years down the road, am I going to get sanctioned by the Department of Justice because I paid an entity that is on a terrorist list? And then you're keeping the flow of those ships out, and the only ships that are going in are the ones that are willing to incur that kind of risk, or that don't give a shit about US sanctions in the first place. So in some sense, I think the biggest center of gravity here is what happens with that future infrastructure of the Strait of Hormuz. And this is what all the posturing is about. Oman is trying to reach out to Iran and figure out, is it a joint thing? They're saying it's going to be voluntary, like the Strait of Malacca. Iran's like, no, it's not voluntary. Well, it can be voluntary, but just look what happens if you go through without paying us. Voluntary. That's what we call
It is
voluntary.
voluntary. Yeah, yeah.
And and the United States is saying, President Trump has said, we'll charge the toll. You think you're going to charge it? I'm going to charge a toll. That uncertainty has to get resolved. As long as that uncertainty is hanging over, like, markets are going to have to care about this, and I think other countries are going to have to care about this. But that I think is the biggest stumbling
So
point.
I'll disagree with you.
Please.
Vehemently so. First of all, like, what other choke points?
Oh man, I mean, we could go back to the Danes and the British.
Yeah, the
One that
Danes,
I particularly
Istanbul.
like. Yeah, the Bosporus, Gibraltar. Maybe if you're South Africa, going around South Africa. I would also expand it beyond the maritime sphere. Because of the Russia-Ukraine war, there's actually a very narrow passage that air freight can go through over Azerbaijan and Armenia. And because a lot of other airspace around there is closed. So do Azerbaijan and Armenia start saying, to go through our airspace, you're going to have to charge a toll? Does every country in the world now say, hey, if a plane is passing through our jurisdiction, like, you're going to have tolls on that? Maybe it's over land borders as well. So once you open up that Pandora's box, once two countries like Iran and Oman are willing to say, yes, you will pay an environmental fee to go through the Strait of Hormuz, you can get really creative at both a top-down macro level and at a very local regional level about what constitutes a tax, what constitutes a toll, who gets to have it, governments competing for it, cartels competing for it. Like, it just gets very messy very quickly.
See, if the world operated that way, Jacob, then people would never pay you for any of your advice. And let me explain what I mean by this. All right. So, like, so I hear this a lot from clients. Well, if X happens, then all of this Pandora's box is opened. And then I'm like, yeah, but you pay me. So let me tell you why that's not the case. If Luka Doncic, okay, wants to play with a center, and so the LA Lakers go out and, pay Walter Kessler $38 million a year.
Yeah.
Do you think that Jake LaRavia is then like, you know what I would like? I would like a point guard. I would like a bruiser power forward. And Rob Pelinka is like, hey, Jake, I know you're like the same color as Luka. I know that you're just as tall as Luka, but you're not fucking Luka. And so that's why, like, this whole, like, oh, but what about the Danes? What the fuck are the Danes going to do? Okay, they could stop Russian shipping, in which case then they have to suffer the consequences. Like, let's not forget, the Iranians paid for this toll with their blood, with their effort. God bless them. So you're absolutely correct, Jacob. There are thousands of other choke points on planet Earth that could play out the exact same way. Oh no, let me put a risk premium on shipping. Oh, that's right, Armenia doesn't want to get bombed. Like Denmark doesn't want to get bombed. So this is where I think that this is a very, very idiosyncratic, unique situation. And so I completely dismiss the American administration's like, it's so funny. This is an administration that clearly doesn't give a shit about global norms. And yet on this one thing, they're like, oh, but norms matter. Norms of
Mhm.
international maritime law. And it's like, first of all, brother, you like just bombed the country because like Uncle Bibi said it would be fine. Like, let's not forget that. But then you're like, oh, but you can't charge a toll. No, yeah, the Iranians can charge a toll. You rushed into this conflict. You're not willing to incur the pain of defeating Iran. So Iran gets to, on occasion, charge a toll. And it doesn't mean anything about anywhere else on the planet because that toll was earned with blood. And I don't see anybody else willing to do that. Oh, the other thing
Yeah.
also I would say is just one last thing is like,
Yeah.
I would also add that there's like a unique geographical feature of this particular choke point that is not really replicated anywhere else. I mean, Bosphorus, yes, yes. I mean, Turkey really can do whatever they want. But the difference is that the Black Sea is kind of in the middle of a very large continent. You can build roads and pipelines elsewhere, and we saw this during the Ukraine conflict. A lot of the Ukrainian wheat just got on the rail, went north, reached the Baltic, reached international markets without really having to go through the Black Sea. So that's not possible right now because none of the countries that are littoral to the Hormuz actually did anything to invest in pipeline infrastructure other than the Saudis, who actually end up being the smartest of the region. They did that. Nobody else did. Um, but that's just another point I would just point. It's the 21st century. Like we're not sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. Like there are alternatives. There's trains. There's pipelines. There's ways to get around this. But yeah, like I both don't think this is a big deal, and I think the Americans are kind of lying when they say they are. I think they're just using this issue like Iran must not have tolls so that, again, for domestic political purposes, it doesn't look like they lost. And then, final thing I will repeat, which I've said before, like there is no magical Microsoft Excel shared file in the proverbial cloud of geopolitics where the Americans can find out who paid the toll. And I've been told like, no, 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 Palantir will figure it out. Like, fuck off. Like, okay. Like if some Malaysian refinery pays the toll for a couple of barrels of Kuwaiti crude, like, can we let it slide so that the world moves on? Yeah, the White House has already let so many things slide. I'm going to call bullshit on this being a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. I disagree, but that's fine. We don't have to agree on everything. I think part of one of the rejoinders, I think, to what you're saying is that yes, Iran paid for it with blood and suffering. There are not many countries out there that are going to pursue a nuclear program and be as hostile as Iran has been and been on real estate that is just as crucial and that has so much international attention to it. The flip side of that is that the United States doesn't have the capacity to go and bomb everyone anymore. So if you're some small country over some choke point that
Why piss
nobody
off?
really cares about, then you just do it, and
Okay, but if
suddenly
nobody
you get
cares
all
about
these
it,
blockages.
but Jacob, if
Yeah.
nobody cares about it, it's insignificant. And second of all, if you're Armenia and Azerbaijan, as you mentioned the air corridor, and you're like, no, fuck it, we want to make some money off of this toll. America doesn't have to bomb you. They can tariff you. They can sanction you. They can do all sorts of things. It's just like it's not worth the trouble. But I'll tell you why you disagree with me. And this is where you're falling into, I think, a trap. I think you care about norms of behavior. And I think that's what you're saying. That's what everybody is saying. It's like, hey, President Trump, you opened up this Pandora box. You cannot let these norms slide. But I find that not hypocritical, but it's not hypocritical. It's just like, but it's President Trump. It's not that I disagree with you that the world would be better if norms were upheld. Of course, I agree with you.
It also
I'm
depends on the
just,
norms.
well, yeah, okay, yeah, that's true. But like, yeah, that's right. There are some 16th century norms we're glad not to have anymore. But the point I'm getting at is that it would be better if this norm was retained. It's just that, look, it's clear that the President Trump doesn't care about international norms. There's the whole Make America Great Again. That's America First policy. So I'm not going to believe this administration, and I don't mean that in a normative way. I'm just not going to believe when they say we're going to uphold this one. I think it's posturing. I think it's domestic politics bullshit. I think it's trying to rescue this as some sort of a win. And I think this tolling issue will slowly dissipate over the next 6 months.
I agree with you on the first part, and I think that's not just a Trump thing. I mean, the United States is the maker of norms and the ignorer of norms when it wants to be. That's the unique role that a global hegemon gets to play. And the United States has been doing that for literally decades. It can't do it as much anymore. And I take your point. Yes, if it's small enough that the U.S. isn't going to bomb them or care about the tariffs, then it's insignificant. But the only point I'm making is that a bunch of small, insignificant things over a period of years could become something significant on a
Yes, you're
broader
right.
level. To your point, in 6 months, maybe there isn't. Maybe this is completely unique, and we're not talking about these things, and there is some kind of change.
But
And this is
let's,
where, yeah, no, go double click. I can tell you
yeah,
want to double click.
yeah, I'll forget otherwise. I'm getting old, Jacob. This is why I interrupt you. Just for everybody who's like feeling sorry for Jacob, guys, feel sorry for me. I'm like the guy that's going to have Alzheimer's like
Oh,
early
I
onset.
love it when he interrupts because he's giving me more time to think to disprove his
And by the
argument.
way, I
Every
just
time
forgot what I
comes.
was going to say. Like, that's proving exactly my point. But okay, wait, hold on a second. Okay, here's what I was going to say. You're absolutely objectively correct. You will be proven correct. And people will point out to some incident in the future and say, aha, you see, Marco, you dismissed Jacob's point. And here it is. South Africa is somehow magically preventing everyone from flowing through all of South Indian Ocean. I'm just like making fun of you there
Yeah,
for a little bit. But
yeah,
look, here's what my counter will be at that point. Let's not fucking pretend that that is occurring because Iran slapped some tolls. That is inconceivable to me, that Iran is setting norms of precedent. That is occurring because the world is multipolar and American hegemony doesn't go as far as it used to, which would have happened whether Iran ended up slapping tolls or not. So I just don't buy this argument that some country somewhere on the planet Earth is going to be like, aha, shit, look at this, we can put some tolls now. No, no, no. There will be a
I'm willing to
moment.
go with you there. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, whether it's a symptom or the virus itself, like that's fine. I'm just saying that the
Okay,
symptom is
yeah,
there,
it's a
and
symptom.
that's fine. Yeah,
Yes, we
okay,
agree
fine.
on that. 100%. That's the world we live in now. Like where the ability to like, oh look, what's the whole point of a unipolar world? By the way, what how is it defined? It means that one country has preponderance of power and it provides global public goods that assuage kind of all the risks. It's the consumer of last resort, it's a central bank of last resort, it defends maritime routes and ensures that they're free for all. Like I mean, obviously this changes through history. Not every global hegemon does it the same way, whatever. But like all roads lead to Rome, and they're purportedly safe. Like you can walk from Aachen to Rome because the Roman legions are defending it. Similarly, here, you can move ships around because America defends it. So, by very definition of the world you and I both agree exists, which is a multipolar global order, there's going to have to be more tolling, right?
Then we agree. Then I think we're actually disagreeing on the semantics, and we agree
Yes.
on the long term of it. And also, by the way, if the global hegemon is supposed to help keep commodity prices stable, like one of the lessons learned here is that China is the one that has actually also given itself a lever because China's cutting of its oil imports is part of the reason that prices are this low. And if China's in trade negotiations with the United States for the rest of the year, they have not trumpeted this particularly or very loudly, but they can go to President Trump and say, you like those $70, $80 Brent crude prices? We can make those go away. That has nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz anymore. That has everything to do with the largesse of the People's Communist Party of China. And I think that's another thing. Like, I mean, you and I have, argued about this since the beginning of the conflict, but I don't think China's perfect in any means, and they commit all sorts of strategic errors all the time. But I think they played this remarkably well, and it's been a huge, I think, boost in the arm for China's standing in the world and a demonstration of the type of power that they can wield. They may not be able to open the Strait of Hormuz with aircraft carriers, but I don't think for a second that Trump jawboning the market is the reason that Brent crude is at 75. There are
Oh,
other things
exactly.
going on there.
Yeah, like China not importing 5 million barrels a day. They cut their imports more than they did during the pandemic, which is kind of insane. By the way, one thing I want to say, which is very interesting here, like what this conversation for the last 30 minutes reminds me of is something that I've struggled to put my finger on, with my clients. Um, and now I know how to explain it, and I think the listeners will be happy, even though they're maybe not investors, which is great. This podcast is not for investors; it's for anybody. But we have to be very, very careful not to equate volatility with downside risk.
Yes.
You know, now what I just said means a lot to investors. Like you gotta get used to a completely different world in terms of Sharpe ratios. If you're out there trying to get low vol returns, good fucking luck to you. You know, like whatever. What I just said, maybe, hopefully, I hope 90% of our listeners don't understand because I hope the 90% of them are not just finance bros. But the reason I say this is that there's a lot of people listening to this. You might be a mom, you might be retired, you might work in construction, whatever. Just as a human being, don't confuse all this increase in stuff happening as a reason to be bearish about where the world is going. This is what the world that we live in just looks like. It's just volatility. Things are going to go up and down. But there's a positive in that because just as wars can start faster, they can end faster. And there's less rigidity in the system. For example, take Ukraine and Russia. Russia invades Ukraine. The West bands together, says Russia's evil. All right, fair. But then allows Russia to export oil to the rest of the world. You know, and that's a good example of a non-ideological conflict that is kind of the prime evidence we're in a multipolar world. In a Cold War scenario, there would have been much harsher punitive action against the Soviet Union or Russia, you know, or maybe even on the purchasers of that oil. I mean, there could have been a World War III. Like China could have been involved. The US could have said, no, Russia is truly evil, despicable. Ideologically, we oppose that administration. We're going to prevent everyone else. Instead, what we got was a phony sanction. The sanctions against Russia are phony. They still export all of their crude. Now, at a smaller discount, blah, 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 you know, there's a discount. And there's a, but that's the point that I would also point out. Like, just because the frequency of these events is happening, the same dynamic that's making them happen also allows them to be less relevant because countries just move on. Countries can both have a conflict and be negotiating at the same time. There's less ideology. It's more interest based. There's less norms. It's more realpolitik. One day, President Trump is invoking how evil Iran is. The next day, he's saying, let's make Iran great again. And that's something that's not just his personal character. I think that is the characteristic of the world we're in. So that I just wanted to say that.
No, I think I agree with you on the volatility point. Let's move on to one more thing before we get into the World Cup. I don't want to talk. I don't want to outweigh the World Cup because it also gets back to geopolitics, and I think gets back to the positive thing that you just said. Because the World Cup is in some ways the greatest support for the positivity that you just talked about. But I want to set you up a little bit here to talk about Europe because we have this NATO meeting. We have NATO showing all these arms deals and talking about how they can fill the gaps that the Americans are making. Donald Trump is talking about Greenland again. He's also removing restrictions on sending weapons and F-35 fighter jets and everything else to Turkey. And Turkey's involvement here is also interesting. There's just two other like little data points I want to throw in here. Germany has a draft of its budget out for next year, and I thought it was a pretty interesting a budget. Now, this doesn't mean that it's necessarily, it's a draft budget. It still has to be approved, but it's approved by the cabinet. But 1 in every 5 euros of federal expenditure in 2027 in Germany will go to defense. I will quote Germany's finance minister right now: "We cannot defend ourselves against Putin with a balanced budget. We must therefore make up for 3 decades in the shortest possible time during which our military was cut back due to budget constraints." That's the German. That's the Teutonic Knights marching in the forest. That's the sound of Panzer divisions that are starting to rev up. Like that's the type of language that I think you should be really, really sort of focused on in general when it comes from Germany and what it's talking about. And then the second part that I want to tee up for you a little bit here. I don't know if you saw this already, but Marie Le Pen's court ruling. She's guilty. She's guilty of misappropriating EU funds to pay party staff, but they've shortened Le Pen's potential ban from office, opening up a potential run for the presidency. She's apparently going to speak, I think, to French television either tonight or tomorrow. So maybe this will be overtaken by events by the time that we get there. But her party, the RN, is polling ahead in most French opinion polls. Now, we don't get the election until next year, but if you really want to, sort of start increasing doubts about the role of the EU, I don't know, is somebody like Jordan Bardella going to be like a problem for the EU? Has to a previous point that you've made, have the EU skeptics been seduced by the EU already, and this isn't that much of a problem. I also cannot help but think, the French courts, part of its reasoning for allowing Le Pen to run and shortening her sentence was, related to issues of democracy, that the voters should be allowed to choose, and they didn't want to restrict her. If she does run, she'll have to run with an ankle bracelet, and she'll be under house arrest the entire time, which would also be really interesting. I can't help but think that if you're a centrist in France, you are rooting for this outcome because no Le Pen has ever won an election at this stage, and I don't think ever will. Like, fine, have Le Pen in the ring, have the far right eat itself alive. This is perfect. This is exactly
Yeah, it's
kind of
like
what you want.
rooting for playing a Chris Paul team in the finals.
Exactly. So I want to tee you up, especially on France, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about Germany there and work on the NATO point before we dive into our World Cup shenanigans.
Yeah, I mean you're asking all the right questions, and it's funny. By the way, you say tee up, but we did not prepare for this, so this is straight from the dome. Uh, so first of all, on the German defense numbers, I believe I haven't fact checked this, but I believe this continues the ratio of defense spending to infrastructure. So when they cite that figure, I believe that includes infrastructure spending as well.
There is, and there's also you can separate out aid for Ukraine, and you can put that in or put it out if you want to jack up the figures. So yes, you can play.
Which is
Seventy two
fine.
point three percent of all statistics are made up. I agree.
No, but like I think it's just important, like that Germany has abandoned austerity and they're struggling to figure out how to implement it. Defense spending is happening faster than infrastructure spending, but yeah, I think that is significant. Obviously, what's interesting about that, by the way, is that there are also some signs that perhaps President Trump will get re-engaged in trying to get a deal between Russia and Ukraine. I think
Oh,
that
sure.
no, and I mean, like, the reason I would say that the odds are rising that we do get some sort of a ceasefire. Let's just assume I'm right, by the way. Let me get to the German point. I wonder to what extent Europeans will be complacent if there is a successful ceasefire in Russia and Ukraine. Like,
Mhm.
I wonder if they're going to make the mistake again that they did in 2008 after Georgia got invaded, in 2014, when Ukraine got invaded. Like, when are, that's my only concern. My only concern with any German number on spending is what happens if the Democrats win the election in 28 and Putin is gone. Like, will Europe then be like, oh well, we're fine. We don't need to actually integrate. We don't need to fix our domestic economy. We don't have to do all this. So that's what I would say. Now, sorry to swerve a little bit into Russia, Ukraine. I do think that what Ukrainian drones are doing is they're bringing the pain to Russia, as we've discussed before.
Mhm.
The problem is that they can't help you conquer territory. So there is a stalemate. So to what end? Are you going to force Russia to withdraw from Crimea by bombing Moscow? That would be curious.
No, but by severing all the land connections and making it impossible for Russia to resupply, you can effectively do the same thing, which is what
Maybe,
they're
but
doing.
I think you're exhausted after 4 years of conflict. Like, you do need to get.
The Ukrainians don't look exhausted to me. They look just fine. And I think actually we didn't say this on the last podcast. I'm glad you brought this up. I think Crimea is the key issue because I think Zelensky now, I think if you put a deal in front of Zelensky's desk and it's Donetsk and Luhansk goes to Putin and Putin gets out of Zaporizhia and Kherson, like I think those lines are fine. I don't think Zelensky's going to give up Crimea. I think he and future Ukrainian leadership
Well,
understand
that's
that as
fine.
long as Crimea is
Yeah.
Russian, they can block Ukrainian exports, and that's going to be a problem because this that predates this war. Like that is Ukraine trying to take some territory back. So I would just point out they want Crimea back, and I
Well,
think that
of course
maybe
they
they
do.
think they can get it.
Serbs want Kosovo back too, but, like, and I want a six pack. But my
I think
point,
this is much more realistic than you getting a six pack. Not
but that is not revealed in the data. When you say the Ukrainians are, I forgot what the term was. Like, they're getting stuff done. They're not. That's objectively not true. The line has not moved at all anywhere along the front line. Again, yes, this is where I think we overstate the importance of drones. And I know our good friend Jim Bianco kind of heard that, and we had a great little debate with him, which is great. Thanks, Jim, for your thoughts. Just to be clear, I think drones are a game changer. However, they can't conquer territory for you. And so what Ukraine has done is that they've really, really incredibly added pain to Russia. We all agree on that, but the front lines are still frozen. And maybe there's a future Jacob where, like, you've severed so much of Russia's connectivity to Crimea that you just invaded, but there's still human beings in Crimea that will defend that. So that's why I think that a ceasefire, not a peace deal, is kind of the way this ends. Clearly, that's how Iran ended. We don't have a deal. I think we need to start being comfortable with a world where there's just a lot of open, frozen, mushy endings to a conflict, like the North Korea-South Korea war. But anyways, that's beside the point. I do think that this is something to keep in mind when we think about European confidence and Europeans getting serious about spending again and like building stuff. Does that go away if there are ceasefires around it? And my answer is it's no. Marine Le Pen. We're going to be talking a lot about her and Bordello and RN, and all of it's going to annoy me because it's completely irrelevant to me. And this is going to annoy everyone. People are going to light themselves on fire. I've had the same view for over 10 years now. I think I made this point in 2014, 2015. The anti-establishment, populist, right or left, whatever you want to call them. Well, let's leave the left outside because the story on the right is easier to talk about. Every single one of these parties, other than Alternative for Deutschland, and they're going to learn over the next 5 years what they need to do. But every single one, the Swedish Democrats, the True Finns, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, the Austrian People's Party, the Fratelli d'Italia, the Five Star Movement, although they weren't really right, left, I don't even know what they were. They were just funny.
I don't know what they were.
Lega, Vox. You can go down the line of every single one of these continental European populist far right parties. They all figured out what the magical ratio of crazy to establishment. And it's very simple. You go crazy anti-immigrant, and then you pull back on everything else. And this is not some magical ratio based in supernatural astrology. It's based on what Europeans want. And the French don't want to leave the euro. The polling shows that. But they do want less immigrants, like everybody else in Europe pretty much does, except like the Green parties, which is why they don't never get to power. And so that's why I'm not too worried about this. In fact, I would argue that in France, the French right, center right, far right, just right of center, has a deep historical thread of Euroscepticism, the empty chair crisis, Charles de Gaulle constantly fighting with the European Commission because he was all for Europe of nations, not Europe of bureaucrats. He's the original Eurosceptic, by the way. He pulled French representation from the EU, almost caused it to die at birth. And that's what RN has like usurped. They're now this traditional Eurosceptic, but they're not anti-European integration. They're saying like, no, we're not going to let like a commission president lead us. It will be us, nations together integrating. But they've completely changed their policy on the euro, on European military and defense integration. And one thing I would say is that this ruling is a little bit of a double-edged sword because Marine Le Pen, as you suggest, is not as competitive as her younger boy toy Bordello, who started off as her boy toy. I mean, I don't even know where they plucked him. He's just like a good-looking young man, who like sounds kind of coherent. But he's actually now polling much better against various candidates than she is. And so I think it would behoove her not to run because that ankle bracelet also means you can't really like go and kiss babies and press flesh, right? Like it's kind of a big deal of being a candidate. So what is she going to like do a debate over Zoom? So I think
she just has to go home every night so she can wake up, high speed train to wherever the high speed train back. But still, like she can't spend the night in these other places. She's got to be at home at night. So it restricts her quite a bit.
France does have TGV, so like there you go. No, look. Here's what I would say. I think it would make sense for them to go with Bordello because, like you said, Marine Le Pen or a Le Pen has never won. Like, give the young generation a chance. Also, RN, intriguingly, is very good with the millennials and younger cohorts, unlike most right-wing parties in Europe. And so I think they just double-click on that with a young, good-looking millennial. One more thing I want to say. So I'm not worried about this. I think they have completely and utterly evolved, just like every other far-right party in Europe pretty much has, other than Alternative for Deutschland. Still waiting for that one. Everyone else has. Everybody else. I just listed like 7 of them. So this is a done deal. They don't worry me at all. I would be buying French assets on any dip. I mean, there's 99 reasons you want to be bearish France. The Marine Le Pen's party is not one of them.
Yeah.
However, the thing that makes me quite bullish on France is something that nobody's talking about, which is that Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the Bernie Sanders of France, but with a fucking edge. You know what I mean? This ain't your Vermont socialist. This is like a real French marchand. Like, let's go to the barricades. Like left wing, baby. Like left wing. So he's polling in the mid-teens. And worse than any other centrist candidate against Bordello in the second round potential matchup. And I think that's very, very good. It seems that there is a quiet consensus in France that they need less government, not more, which is interesting because Bordello, he's not talking about cutting any benefits, but he is talking about cutting taxes, which of course, how's the math going to work? Whatever. Let's leave the math aside. The fact that the far right in France or center right is now talking about, hey, we probably need a lower corporate tax rate. Yeah, you're right. Objectively speaking, the far left is not as competitive as it has been. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not talking about.
No, nobody's talking about that because everybody is talking about this through the lens of Euroscepticism of the 2010s. I mean, and to your point, I mean, I pulled up a
Yeah.
quote from Bardella. He says, "I'm not against Europe. I'm against the current functioning of the EU." Okay, you're not against the
Boom.
EU.
Boom. Charles de Gaulle. That's his line. Not, oh my God. By the
Mélenchon,
way, Charles de Gaulle is literally turning his grave right now. He's going to come at me like a
yeah, probably.
ghost. Yeah, because I just compare Bordello to him. I'm sorry, General de Gaulle. I really apologize. But yes, that's like traditional Gaullist right.
Well, the person who's going to be really upset is Macron because I think he thinks of himself as the heir to Gaullism or whatever. But Mélenchon has also been fairly an EU skeptic. But a poll was done of his party, and only 10% say that membership in the EU is a bad thing. So I think to your point, I think we're legislating old battles, and that the real conversation here is to your point. Like France actually has a lot of advantages relative to some of its neighbors. Like they bet on nuclear. Their demographics are better than most of the others. Yes, immigration sucks. It also means higher fertility rates. And if you can integrate immigrants and higher fertility rates into there's not all European states can sort of say that, and they also have broad reach. Before we turn to the World Cup, because France is relevant to that, anything you want to say about NATO?
Yeah.
Nah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, World Cup, take us away. I've been watching. I haven't been watching everything, but I have been watching. I confess. I was watching that match between Mexico and England. I texted you about this. I went in rooting for Mexico. I came out like by minute 50, I was all in on England. By minute 75, I was like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest rearguard action
it's
I've ever."
Coming home. It's coming home.
This is incredible. I hate the English, and here I am, like, "Oh my God, I really hope these guys hold on." So anyway, take us away. Oh, actually, no, I know how I wanted to lead this up. I reread your report last night just to make sure. Did not see a lot of analysis about Cape Verde in the report. In fact, the only time you mention it is in a little tiny graphic on page 17 at the bottom of Group H. And that might be the defining moment of the World Cup before we get to Donald Trump and his weighing in on FIFA. So, but you take us away.
Well, I want to talk about Donald Trump weighing in. I got a lot of hate mail on X because I suggested that this is par for the course. In fact, our quantitative strategist at BCA Research introduced a home bias coefficient into the math, and I believe we had all three nations entering the round of 16, which was correct. It's almost inconceivable that they wouldn't. And so I said, hey guys, this is not the most egregious form of corruption that I've seen in my lifetime with FIFA. And of course, I got a lot of hate mail, mostly from liberals who literally are like children who walked into an adult conversation when it comes to soccer because they're Americans. No offense to Americans, but you guys discovered this game 30 years ago. And so
Marko,
everyone was like,
liberals are also the only Americans actually watching the World Cup.
But that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. Exactly. There's this incredible intellectual pretzel that we talked about this earlier. I said that I found out that America is truly polarized when in 2010 I was cheering at the top of my lungs for the young upstart like Landon Donovan led team, and then there's all these like supposedly patriotic Americans who don't want to cheer for this because supposedly it doesn't matter. We're still a great country. It's like, well, I don't know. That's when you show your patriotism, when you cheer for a country when it's not expected to win. But anyways, we talked about this before. What I want to go on this is that I got a lot of hate mail for saying this, but it's funny because people think that I'm defending President Trump. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that this is why we watch the World Cup. It's for the theater. And what I'm also saying is that quite often when he does something like this, it backfires. So let's talk about this. See, a few people said that Belgium would wake up because of this, and I was like, no way. The Belgians have been asleep for 200 years. Like I always think of Belgium as a country that's just like kind of begging to melt into the EU as soon as possible. Can we just become a super state already so we don't have to put up with pretending we're a country?
All of our Belgian nationalist listeners, please direct your hate mail to cousin over here.
It's
I'm
funny
happy for you
because
to remain independent and to eat your waffles and chocolate.
There's kind of not a lot of them. There's like there's the nationalist Flemish, and then the rest is like, he's kind of right. Like, but whatever. We have great restaurants in Brussels, so fuck you. How's your country working out? So here's what I want to go. What I find amazing is that throughout World Cup history, Jacob, small nations have struggled to win. Eusebio's Portugal, Puskás's Hungary, Cruyff's Netherlands, Modric's Croatia. There's a reason that the whole thing has been won 8 times. By 8 countries, by giants, by true powerhouses. Other than Uruguay, the first 2 World Cups, which whatever, like it was a long time ago. God bless Uruguay. They continue to be competitive. My point is that it's really difficult, and there were some incredible teams like Hungary. Puskás's Hungary was like, it was a shock when West Germany beat them. Eusebio's Portugal, same thing. This is back in the 50s and 60s. And then Cruyff's Netherlands, twice in the finals. Modric's Croatia, right? So we all know that there's like this incredible run by smaller countries, but they always lose. And I think it's pressure. For a small country, winning a World Cup is beyond enormous. There's like, it's life-changing. It's a country-changing moment. Mm-hmm. And for Belgium in particular, I don't know to what extent you know this, Jacob, but they had a lot of pressure put on them. In 2014 and 2018, they were actually candidates to win. They were seen as a dark horse, but then in 2018, 2022, even as one of the favorites. And I think what's always missed from Belgium is esprit de corps and the ability to match the moment with passion. They just never really played with passion, even though their nickname is the Red Devils. So, little known fact, the goalie, Courtois, stole De Bruyne's girlfriend. Maybe that's the source of all the problems, And what I love about what just happened over the last 24 hours, Jacob, is that Donald Trump, as he does, he just fucking fixed that. He fixed that. He fixed it good. Let me tell you something. This man is the greatest person on planet Earth when it comes to solving other countries' deficit in esprit de corps.
This is the zag we were all waiting for.
This is the zag. I'm watching this game when Lukaku scores the 4th goal and starts doing the Trump dance with his fellow teammates. I've never seen Belgian players this happy. I've never seen them this united, this coordinated. And in that first half, when he took out some of the veterans like De Bruyne and Lukaku, and he just put some athletes. They whooped America. Just took off the belt, bent the United States of America in its 250-year glory, and just spanked them. And I see all these like American, supposed patriots like, oh, it's our 7th sport. Shut the fuck up. You're a country of 400 plus million people, richest country in the world, greatest athletes. You can't field a team that beats a country of 11 million. You can. It's a great team, great young guys who really like just, you want your daughter to date every single one of these guys in the U.S. men's soccer team. But by God, Donald Trump set fire to Belgium. And I haven't seen Belgium set on fire like this since fucking Dunkirk. All right. This was just, it was unbelievable what we witnessed single-handedly And this is what I tell to a lot of my clients, Donald Trump is maybe the greatest thing that's happened to the rest of the world. His impact on America, TBD. But he is like cod liver oil. And I'm sure I made this joke before in this podcast, but effectively, cod liver oil is what our grandparents used to drink as vitamin, right? It's stinky, it tastes bad, but it's good for you. And that's kind of what Trump has been so far. He's making Belgium great again. He's making countries all around the world great again by kind of intervening. And what was, of course, annoying about the intervention is that he bragged about it. That's the part that was like, that elevated it to a sort of a next level. That said, and so this is the second thing I want to cook on. That said, is this the most egregious example of political interference of home bias? The bragging part about it, yes. I don't ever recall anybody bragging about having corrupted FIFA in one way or another. But let's just be clear on three examples here. First and foremost, our good friend and cousin Juan Correa. He came on to discuss his, BCA football World Cup forecast. He tweeted this about England in 1996. In 1966, they were given a phantom goal in the final. They had Argentina's captain sent off in the quarterfinal versus them for dissent, even though the ref spoke no Spanish, so how he knew what dissent was. And then finally, an English ref let Portugal literally break the legs of the world's best player at the time, Pele, which allowed, of course, then England to go through without having to face the greatest team in the world. So that's Juan's example of a host bias. I personally witnessed the worst example in 2002. South Korea got to the semifinals at a time when South Korea was not good. You can go and look at that roster. Like, I think none of them played in Europe. It's not like today's South Korea. But they got to the semifinals by beating Italy in the most egregious game ever played in a World Cup, round 16 game. By the way, that Italy team in 2002, 4 years later, they were crowned the world champion. But in 2002, 4 years earlier, they lose to a South Korean team, which basically semi-amateur players. Come on, South Korean league. All right. And what happened was this was an incredibly unqualified ref. So the way that FIFA made sure that South Korea went to the semifinals was they used the NBA strategy of getting Bill Kennedy, right, to ref important games. Is it Bill Kennedy, the ref that always, like, whenever he shows up, it's like, oh shit, Kennedy's reffing the game.
I mean, I think Tim Donaghy is maybe what. I mean, he's the one who was proven for this. But yeah,
he was proven. But there's still like a team of refs the NBA always rolls out. So, anyways, let me just tell you who they wheeled out for this game. The guy's name is Byron Moreno from Ecuador. And a sidebar on Moreno, because I just love this. He was suspended from refereeing for all sorts of irregularities by FIFA and Ecuador. And he was eventually arrested at JFK for trying to smuggle 6 kilograms of heroin into the US in 2010. This is the man that FIFA had. I mean, imagine if one of the NBA refs was also like member of like a white supremacist group. For fuck's sakes, they had a guy who 10 years later ends up being a heroin smuggler. Now, that game was incredible, but what people forget is that in the next round, Jacob Shapiro, in the next round, facing Spain, South Korea miraculously wins the penalties because 2, not 1, not uno, dos goals by Spain were claimed offside and they weren't. So, I mean, I don't even know the guy who plays in Monaco that Trump rescued. Oh, and by the way, he made such a big fucking deal in the game. Did he not? Yeah. Come on. And then finally, of course, the third example of corruption that I just have to point out is that the last 2 World Cups in 2018 and 2022, which were hosted by Russia and Qatar, respectively, brought down the president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, because they were obviously, chosen through corruption. Now, to this, many commentators say that's whataboutism. Just because Russia and Qatar and South Korea and England were naughty, we as Americans should do better. I agree. I'm just trying to put the World Cup into its proper geopolitical and historical context. Rant over.
I love it. I have a couple things to say because I'm getting more into it. So the first thing, well, I have a bunch of things here because I think it's not just cod liver oil for the rest of the world. This might be the cod liver oil that America needs to finally take soccer seriously. Because
Ooh,
after President
I
Trump
like it.
did this, it was Ted Cruz himself who said, "Thank you, Mr. President, for getting rid of that red card." And suddenly, Republican politicians started talking about the. 2 weeks ago, these guys were only talking about UFC, including President Trump. He didn't care about the
Yes,
World Cup. He was talking
nailed
about
it.
these other things. This also speaks to President Trump's. This is his genius. He is
Yes.
truly a genius at this. He doesn't care if the coverage is good or not. He just wants to be in the coverage. He saw that something was happening with the World Cup because we've had these incredible matches. Even if most of Americans are not watching, I'll get to that in a second. Like just Cape Verde's story by itself, like you say, winning a World Cup is a nation changing event. Cape Verde had a nation changing event by losing to Argentina and getting as far as they did. Absolutely incredible. I think the English match also like absolutely incredible as well. But when you think about how it was starting to get some currency in the media, some Americans were starting to pay attention. Here's Donald Trump. Here I am, guys. Like I want this. I want you to be talking about me. And we were talking about him for 4 days. I woke up. I stayed up late to watch that England Mexico match. I'm a dad of toddlers, and my kids get up at like 5:30. I don't stay up late. Cousin can attest to this. Like if it's after 10 p.m. and Jacob's home, Jacob doesn't want to do the podcast. Jacob wants to be in bed because he's getting ready for 5:30. I stayed up till 11 o'clock p.m. Central Time watching not just the match, but the reactions afterwards. Was somebody going to hit the English as they left the stadium? I was like,
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to wake up and read the news the next day. All the analysis and back and forth. And here I am reading about Donald fucking Trump and about what Trump has to say about this red card situation. I don't want to talk about England. I want to talk about the most incredible thing I've seen in team sports probably in my lifetime. Like that was absolutely like on the edge of my chair. I also, and here's my little joke. Um, this is also completely in keeping with President Trump because he has a penchant for supporting things that Americans either don't like or don't care about. 60% of Americans disapproved of the U.S. decision to wage war against Iran. He did it anyway. I looked this up in a 2026 YouGov poll. Just 29% of Americans, 29%, cousin, said they were interested in the World Cup. And of that 29%, only half of them said they were going to tune in to World Cup matches. So when President Trump is inserting himself into the media commentary about soccer, you know who he's pining for? He's pining for the liberals. He wants the liberals to like
And
him.
immigrants.
Yeah,
And,
all these
and
people.
anchor babies. And anchor babies, which
It's incredible.
Balogun kind of is. Like there's so much content, Jacob, to talk about that the world hasn't even had time to like assess the fact that Balogun is basically an American because of birthright citizenship.
That too.
His mom, I think, is Nigerian. She had him because she couldn't travel back home, so they didn't let her on the plane. So she had him in the U.S. He becomes an American citizen, goes, has a career in, I think, England. That's where he was in youth academies and stuff. And then he's like, yeah, I'm going to play for the U.S. Fine. You know why? He apparently chose to play for America because of a vacation in Orlando, which let's leave that aside, But like the point is, there are so many paradoxes. And you're right. I do want to talk about Trump though. Your point is like I don't want to talk about Trump. I want to talk about this other stuff. Every World Cup, like that is the magic of the World Cup. And when we had the World Cup episode, I mentioned that the 1990 World Cup made me. It was incredibly formative for me as an 8-year-old. I'm watching the country that I love, that I grew up in, that I'm like proud of, Yugoslavia, like die at the World Cup. You're watching West Germany become Germany at the World Cup. It was such an incredible, like politics, geopolitics, and sports don't mix like this anywhere else because the stakes are so huge. This is the international game. Now, obviously, Chinese and the Indians don't really play.
Well,
The
I wanted to
Chinese,
bring that up. I didn't
yeah,
know this. Like, India's never even qualified, and
yes,
China's
that's true.
qualified once. So
Yes,
this is the
yes.
world sport, but 2 billion plus people don't have a team that they can send. But Cape Verde sends a team that gets all the
But
way to Argentina and takes them to the end. I don't know. Help me understand that.
so one thing I would say is that I mean it's the closest we get to the world sport. Provide like with full respect that the three most populous countries don't actually play it. India, China, and the US being the third. I mean, the US is a recent. US didn't attend the World Cup from 1960 to 1990. And in 1990, they qualified because FIFA basically put a gun to their head and said, like, dude, you're going to host 94. You got to qualify 1990. Like, literally, it was like, guys, just embarrassing. So for much of the 20th century, actually, the three most populous countries did not even play it. Nonetheless, it is the most popular game. I mean, what is the alternative? Basketball does not come close. Does not.
No, it doesn't come close. Well, I actually wanted to, the match against Bosnia set a record for number of Americans who watched a
Mm.
soccer match. It was 32 million. How many Americans do you think tuned into Super Bowl LIX between the Chiefs and the Eagles, if you had to guess?
160, 180.
Wow, 128 million.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're talking. But I mean, if you're in India and Pakistan, I mean, cricket, I mean, that's
Yeah, for
almost
sure.
2 billion people right there. So, but you're right. There's no currency outside of that. In terms of global reach, I think you'd be hard pressed to replace soccer. And that's one of the things that's romantic about it. It's not one of these sports like tennis, which is an aristocratic game. Like you just need
Well,
a
it's individual
ball
too.
and an open space. So anybody anywhere can play it. You can be, one of these former colonies that is dirt poor and everything else and field a really, really good soccer team. Like you can't do that even with basketball. Like basketball, you need hoops and you need, a floor. It's like there's just a lot of
So
equipment. You don't need any equipment for this. You just
no,
need a
you're
ball.
nailing it. You're nailing it down. It's something that's easy to do, but also I think what's interesting is that countries do adopt stereotypes of almost themselves as they play. So one
Yeah.
example of this, my kids have gotten into World Cup, and I'm so happy of that. And they were confused by Germany's inability to beat Paraguay and French ability to defeat them. So Paraguay, and by the way, this has always been the case. Paraguay considers themselves people of the red earth. The coach even said it. Like, we're hardworking people. We're not the creative Brazilians and Argentinians. So we're going to beat you with hard work. Like that's how Paraguay sees itself. So there's no samba. There's no there's no smiles on their faces as they're playing. They're just fucking grinding you to the earth. And they do all sorts of like dirty game, as Mbappe said. What was interesting about this is the Germany couldn't handle it. And like I was like, I asked my 17-year-old, like, do you have any ideas why Germans didn't know how to deal with it? And I was so proud of her. She goes, because Germans follow the rules. And so they don't know how to handle it when somebody doesn't. And I was like, you
Oh.
fucking nailed it. Whereas the French, France is a funny country. It's Western, it's first world, but do they really follow the rules the way the Germans do? No. So they were more than happy to play that style. I mean, not more than happy. They were, and as Mbappe said, is like, do you know where we're from? Like, we're good playing this style. We'll
Well,
beat you this style. We'll beat you on. No. Just to land the plane.
yeah.
Let me just be
Sorry.
very clear. Quality wins at the end of the day. Had the German team had the quality of German teams of the past, they would have ground Paraguay into the fucking ground. Do you think Lothar Matthäus and Klinsmann are losing to this Paraguay team? Fuck no. But teams at some point, on average, revert to the stereotype of their nation. And that's what I find romantic about the World Cup in a way as well. That you're seeing the, like in an innocent, non, like non-threatening way, a true contest of countries where their true character kind of comes out. And that's what's funny about U.S. soccer too. Like Landon Donovan was interviewed, and he said all his teammates in England would always tell him, like, man, we hate playing against you Americans, man. You guys just don't fucking know the game's over because you're so like immature, naive, and don't know what football is. So in the last 5 minutes of a match, you guys are down 2-0. Any other country would just be like, okay, fine, we lost, fuck it. Whereas you guys are still running around, tackling, trying to score. It's annoying. Stop it. And I'm like, there's nothing more American than that. That's why America is as great as it is. There's always another 40 acres across the river. It's like manifest destiny. It's this like naive approach to life, which actually leads to greatness. And I've always thought Americans play that way. There's no like dragging oneself on the ground, being hurt, dragging out the game, being tactical, being quote unquote wise, and yet that's why the soccer was beautiful. So, anyways, I think that's another component of this that is, I hate to say that there are stereotypes that work, but like in a way they're not negative. They're just like, this is how this country and nation thinks.
Yeah.
It's kind of like World War Z, the book by Mel Brooks. that our Uncle Peter brought up in our session. It's a great book because it's about what happens in a zombie pandemic, and each chapter is about how different countries handle it, given their unique culture and set of circumstances and context. It's same. You've spread this game across the world, but everyone plays it with a different style that is reflective of the way that they think. And I find that fun and endearing
You're,
and healthy and cute and awesome.
yeah, I mean, you said Mel Brooks. It's Max Brooks, but I'd love to
Sorry,
see
Max.
the Mel Brooks version of World War
Well,
Z. That
he's
would
the
be really
son.
good. Yeah,
He's Mel
I
Brooks'
know.
son, which
He's
is
Mel Brooks,
hilarious.
but I'd like to see Mel take his
Yes.
stab at it. To your point, like I said, I was rooting for Mexico going into that Mexico England match because how could you not? I mean, unless you were from England. And the moment that it shifted for me was when Harry Kane got shoved to the ground,
Yeah.
and I think he even got called for a foul on the play or something like that. And that Mexican player went over and yelled something in his face. Now, if you did that in an American basketball game or on a U.S. football field, it's like we're fists up, we're ready to roll. It was as if like the Mexican wasn't even there. Harry Kane just like got up and was like, "Yeah, I'm good. Like, let's get to it. You want to do this? Like, we're fine." It was that real English stiff upper lip. Also, you said something about Landon
Good
Donovan and
point.
the announcers. I hate the announcers, or at least the
Mm.
American announcers.
Oh,
One
that's
reason is because
harsh.
I don't know soccer that well yet. So like I'm looking to the announcers to actually guide my understanding of the game, and they're not doing it. Like they're not helping me understand what's happening,
Mm.
what this rule is. With the Mexico England match, it was so loud in the Azteca that I could not like hear the announcers over the crowd, which was also pretty amazing. Um, but I also just find that like, and I'm sure this is true of most announcers, but when I'm watching like other announcers of other countries announce games, like there's this like wonderfulness to it. Whereas like the U.S. announcers, when the U.S. was playing Bosnia, and I'm really sorry Bosnia because I was actually rooting for Bosnia even though I'm American. Like even I could tell the Bosnians sucked. They were slow compared to the Americans. And the American announcers kept on just being like, wow, this is what incredible victory and skill from the American team. And I was like, it looks like it looks like the Bosnians are 10 years older and all got drunk last night, which is probably true. Like that's the way
I
they're
mean,
running around. I don't even know
veteran,
soccer.
veteran Edin Hedgeko. I mean, like the guy's been
Yeah,
around.
well,
Yeah,
again, could the announcer once say like, this is maybe not like a real litmus test. Like Belgium is a real team waiting for them in the next round. Like maybe they
I'm
want
just
to do
checking.
something.
Edin Dzeko, who's one of my favorite European players over the last 20 years, but like the guy is he's 40. And a 6'4" soccer player at 40, that's tough, man. That's
Yeah.
a lot of infrastructure to move around. Listen, I
Hold on.
think
I got to say
please
two
go
more
ahead.
things, and then
Yeah.
you talk about. We also have not yet brought up Norway, which, if you're
Mm.
right, Norway doesn't stand a chance because this is a small nation. I just want to read a couple because we're talking about how players are stereotypes of their nations, and stereotypes are fine. Stereotypes are only bad when you use them to do bad things to people. We like stereotypes. We all judge people. There are certain averages that we have to respect. Anyway, is it Haaland? Haaland, I think, right?
I think so.
This is from the New Yorker, a profile of him in the New Yorker. Large maniacal striker, has exceedingly Norwegian traits. He sometimes exercises by chopping wood in the forest. He consumes 6,000 calories a day. After training sessions, he drinks raw milk. He owns a tax-sheltered investment company in Luxembourg named Pillage. He bought an edition of a 13th century old Norse saga for $130,000, then donated it to his local library because he explained, I've never been much of a reader. He has flowing blonde hair, often compared to a Viking's. He brings the intensity of a raiding party to the sport. He once posted a photo of himself on a plane staring ahead intensely with the caption, just raw dogged a 7-hour flight, no phone, no sleep, no water, no food, only map. Like just incredible. But the last thing I just want to say is this is why the Trump administration should love the World Cup. And this is why I think it actually really is important geopolitically. Because as you remember in the national security strategy, which we talked about episodes ago, the Trump administration's entire big change, or one of their big changes in that document, was the nation state should be more than international organizations. And the United States exists in order to defend the interests of the nation state against these transnational organizations that are taking advantage of them. By the way, FIFA is the transnational organization. So when Trump is like, hey, FIFA, do what I want, and then Belgium complains, Trump's response is, okay, Belgium, like, you can go tell FIFA what to do. Oh, wait a minute, you don't have an army. Like, why don't you just like? But it's entirely what they're talking about, and it is the only. I don't know. Check myself on this. is this the only form in which nationalism is accepted in the liberal community and the liberal weenie
Yeah,
community that's
but that's what
actually
we're getting
watching
at.
these games? And this is as long
Yes.
as people are rooting for their nations in the World Cup, like I think we're good as a world. The moment like people stop rooting for their nations in the World Cup, like maybe something very terrible has happened.
Well,
But
so
I've been watching this and like I feel good about the
I'm so
world for the
glad.
first time all year.
I think you're feeling good for the right reasons, you know, and it's not because of the quality of soccer, by the way. Because of the quality of the moment, of the spectacle. By the way, the soccer, quite frankly, at the World Cup is like 30% of the games are good. This has always been the case. It's not because they expanded it. The Euros are much more competitive. There's very few minnows, you know, like at a World Cup, you always have occasionally like countries that are just going to get pounded. So I think you nailed it. And it's funny because, um, like I talk to liberal friends who find the display of nationalism like too much, or the fights, or the yelling between fans and stuff like that. But that's like asking humans not to be humans. I think, I think that in order to make the world a better place, which I should not care about because I'm a nihilist, bathed in aloof indifference.
Yeah, but scratch the surface and there's a softy in there. We
But
all
like,
know.
if we were going to make the world a better place, you have to make space for displays of nationalism. And this is a great way to do it. It's fun, and it's fun because in this display nobody dies, except fans on occasion, and the tragedy in Mexico City. Way too many people were celebrating the Ecuador win. For the most part, absolutely nobody dies, and smaller countries get their moment in the sun. A country like Belgium gets to thumb its nose. The little Belgium cherub gets to pee in President Trump's pool, right? Like that's the moment that's, I think, like just wonderful to see. Like everybody gets a chance, and I think that's awesome.
Well, and if only this could be the way that we actually work out issues. Like, okay, Zelensky. Like, if I was the president, hey, Mr. Zelensky, Mr. Putin, come here, sit down. Here's what we're gonna do: stop the stupid war. Okay, you're gonna play a soccer match every 4 years for
Ukraine
control of
versus Russia.
Crimea.
By the way,
Ukraine versus Russia. Whoever wins gets Crimea for the next 4 years. Okay, and
yeah.
then we play again.
Oh,
Game on. Stop bombing each other. Stop blocking up global commerce. Stop killing children and destroying apartment buildings. Like your best. This is like Achilles versus whoever your best
it'll
is,
be a
and like let's
terrible
go.
game, by the way. Just knowing the way that part of Eastern Europe plays. Obviously not Southeastern Europe, which obviously hashtag Croatia's awesome. Vatini are amazing, but like, yeah, Ukraine versus Russia, that would be a terrible soccer match. No, I think I'm just so pleased. By the way, I'm pleased as your cousin, that you found so much joy in this. I'm pleased in seeing my kids for the first time react this way. And I'll close on this. It's not just about this being a forum where the world can come together and just kind of, like belt out anthems at the top of your lungs, stuff like that, in a healthy, fun way. It's not just that. It's also that we don't have at a family unit any more shared moments.
Mm.
We don't go to the water cooler after the latest episode of The Office to talk about Jim and Pam. We don't do that anymore. Nothing is in real time anymore except sports. But the problem with sports is that it's so specialized. Like you said, Indians like cricket, Americans in the South like college football, Americans in the Northeast like professional football, whatever. And so what's great about this is that it's given, at least in my family, I can't get my kids to do anything together anymore. Everybody's off in their own spaces, and I think this is awesome because we all watch this, and it's once every 4 years. And my wife, it was funny. She said something like, "Oh, I wish this happened every year," but then the magic would be gone, you
Yeah,
know. And so
it's
I'm glad
true.
you enjoy it.
Although I do enjoy, but I also think to go back to a slightly serious point that we made before, like there are some countries that are missing. Like if you want to avoid the Thucydides trap, you might be well more placed in getting China to qualify for the World Cup and in on this rather than all of your dialogues and everything else. Like there's a huge portion of the globe, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but like I'm thinking of this and seeing all the video from the national capitals and everybody cheering and the pride that you're seeing out there. But like, is that happening in Beijing? Is that happening in Delhi? Is that happening in some of
In
these
Delhi,
places that are
no.
not a part of it?
In Delhi, no. But China uh, is quite into football. and basketball. Of course, they've had more success at basketball, but football is very popular in China. Very popular in China. It's just that they haven't had any success at it. Um, and I think that's too bad. And I salute America for one thing, that they could have remained aloof of this. They could have. And so I do salute America for being willing to have its ass kicked every 4 years by a small country.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll just say is like there are some things that bother me here. Like there is an element of bread and circuses to this. Like if I have to see one more rich person who has a box seat and I know how much the tickets are just to get into the nosebleed seats in these things, like I hate that element of it. And there is an element of that
I
to it. Like
mean,
ignore the rest of the world because you guys get to watch soccer,
that's the case in
football.
everything.
I
Like
can't
New
call it.
York Knicks finals,
I know.
medicines.
I know
Like it's
it's
just
and I don't like it. Like, and
yeah, it's
it
fair.
seems like anti the ethos of soccer. And there's other things here about Trump,
Look what.
Trump with the FIFA decision, the
Hmm.
Eurocentric nature of the sport. There's a lot of things there. But I don't know. I think it's been relatively nice to watch, and a nice, like, it's a nice unideological thing and something that reminds us about shared experience. So from that point of view, I've been in. But
Well,
I
it
stick to
reminds
what I
us.
said, by the way. Like, only 30% of Americans are watching. So like, it's not like
I
Americans are not really involved here. I don't think.
I will say one more thing. It's a great example of how competition between states is not bad. It can produce good results. And one example that I want to say about that is, I have a lot of like really snob football fan friends in my life. Shout out to my Armenian buddy Emin. Love him. He knows infinitely more about football, and I've defended him on the football pitch, and it's extremely difficult to do that. So this guy's a genius, but huge snob. And he like basically said, "I'm not watching this crap until the round of 16
Hmm.
because it's been diluted by expanding it to 48." But I think he's been wrong, and a lot of snobs who said that have been proven wrong. And I mean snob in an endearing way. These are people who just are connoisseurs of football. Like this is garbage. Cape Verde is garbage. The interesting thing is that because of the competition, countries have gotten better. Countries like Curacao, formerly Dutch Indies, right? Yeah, Netherlands.
I think so.
Anyways, and then of course Cape Verde. These countries have recruited expats. So like they've gotten more creative about bringing talent. Same with America. A lot of the kids, like the kid that scored the goal, Tillman, I think it is. Yeah,
Hmm.
he was American service member father, but German mom. So he was somebody who could have played for Germany.
Born
The
in
guy would have.
Germany. Yep.
There you go. So like, I think that's good. That's great. Countries are taking it seriously. The competition matters to them. They want to put their best foot forward, and so they've gotten better because the competition is there. And I think one of the problems with basketball, by the way, is that America and Serbia just dominate. I don't know if you know this, but World Basketball Competition just took place for under 17-year-olds. Guess who was in the
Mhm.
final? The United States and Serbia. And occasionally you have like Italy or like Germany or France or Spain
France.
get but like there's just not enough. That's like when you think about football and you say, oh, this country is ranked 35 in the world. That's like a serious country that can kick your ass on a good day. Whereas in basketball, the 35th country, are you kidding me? You've got people like playing Div 3. So I think this is a great example of how, even though the world is multipolar and there's more countries, trying to get their own, that competition does not have to produce conflict and death. It can also just get all of us to a better place.
I know we're running over on time. We'll have to leave basketball to the next time because there's a lot to talk about there too. But let's close out. Who are you picking for? Are you sticking? I believe it was France that you guys picked in the report. Are you sticking with the pick?
I'm going to stick with France. I love this team. Mbappe was right. They can play dirty and win. They can play clean and win. They're creative. I love the team, and they're good. They're good guys. Like again, just like American guys. Like I just look at every single one of them. They're well spoken. They're awesome. They're athletes. Great representatives of France, and chapeau to France. I think they are the best. I think Spain is going to be a good test for them eventually. If both sides, of course, win. But Argentina's just lucky, and FIFA seems to want Messi to have another final because it's ridiculous what's just happened, especially with Egypt. Egypt got robbed, which I could have told you was coming. So hopefully Colombia puts an end to that shit. So yeah, I'm not on the England train though. Like I don't think they're gonna win, but I also like them, and I think Jude Bellingham just an incredible player. By the way, the English fans serenaded him with Hey Jude in the stands was beautiful. It was wonderful. But let's not forget they also ran him out of England. So
Yeah. Well, as they were singing Wonderwall at the end, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm probably gonna
oh,
try and
like
get Wonderwall
same.
in
I mentioned that to my kids. I was like, "What is this shit? Why?" Anyway, so
I
and
also
English fans got to explain this to us.
well, it's funny. Everybody's talking about Jude. I was like Jordan Pickford. My God, man! Like I'm trying to buy Jordan Pickford jerseys. That was me. I'm taking England. I don't. I mean, like maybe they'll
All right,
disappear.
nice.
Apparently it's like fairly common for like England to just like disappear after an incredible victory.
Yes,
But like really,
yes.
I don't know that I've watched something in team sports that was as impressive as them holding off Mexico for what was it, 40 minutes? It was
I know.
absolutely incredible.
So it is Mexico. But anyways, listen, I'm not going to rain on your parade, Jacob. I want you to enjoy it. I want you to pick England and stick with it and just enjoy it because
Well,
I'm a
and I think we all
basketball
hope
fan.
I think we all hope that Norway wins, right? Because if Norway wins,
I mean,
first of all, you're
obviously.
incorrect. But yeah,
No. If Norway wins, math is not incorrect. Like small countries do get to the semis. That's true. And with occasion, they just don't win. So if Norway wins, like Sweden in '94, Zlatan said, I see a lot of that in this team, and I agree with him.
Mm.
Or Bulgaria in '94 as well. So there is a good chance that they get in. It's just that can they win? But listen, keep cheering. I think it's awesome. I'm an immense basketball fan, immense. But there's absolutely nothing that comes close to the awesomeness of the World Cup in sports.
We'll leave it there.
Oasis must be buzzing.